David, are you ready to kick us off with the software roadmap?
I'm down for that. Yes, I am completely ready.
All right, I'm going to hand it off here, and there you can go. If you have questions or anything comes up, drop them in the chat, and we'll help give them an answer.
All righty. So yeah, I'll get started. Thank you for coming, everyone. So just real quick, who am I? I think probably everybody knows me, but my name is David Ripley, and I'm the Director of Software and Systems Engineering. My job here is to help figure out where our network management systems, where they're going, and how to make them better, and how they fit in with all the other parts of GlobalNOC. So what I'm going to talk about today is just sort of update you on the software roadmap. That's a pretty big map. So we're not going to be able to cover everything, but hopefully we can cover sort of some important areas of interest for us, and more importantly for you as our customers, where we think we're going to go in the future, and where we've been recently, and how that fits into the bigger picture. I do want to encourage people to ask questions either as we go along, and I'll try and leave some time at the end as well. One of the things that we're looking for here is, we're not just sort of wanting to put information in front of you. As always, we're making our best effort to sort of set our priorities and our direction based on what we think is going to be best for everyone. But we're definitely looking for feedback and input. So I want to encourage that, even if there's something specific as we're going along. Or you can always drop me an email. My email address is right there on that slide. So if anyone came to the last software roadmap update, you may recall I used the same quote just to sort of set the scene. I looked for a better one, but basically, I really like this one, and I'm a big Peter Greenaway fan, so I just decided to keep that in there. Something that I think is important to note is that all of this is a work in progress. Maps change in the same way that the landscape that they represent changes. So 6 months from now, things might look a little bit different, but this is where we think we're going today. Excuse me. So there's been a lot of talk already about organizational priorities for the past year or so. So we've been using those as a framework to help guide our development priorities. There are some other considerations as well, some that we've carried over from last year and some that are new that we're also using to shape some of the directions that we're going in. But at a high level, these 5 organizational goals are still very much driving the strategy. So other considerations, I'll talk about those as we go along. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit on fair and transparent prioritization. There is going to be more on this later, and Luke's already mentioned these. There's a certain inevitability that as we're going through the presentations during the conference, that there's going to be a little bit of crossover here. Hopefully we're coming at it from different angles and talking about how they influence different parts of the organization and influence it in different ways. I apologize in advance if I tread on the toes of, in this case, Shannon, who's going to be talking about fair and transparent later on. But so from a software point of view, the challenge that we handle, that we're trying to manage here and come up with tools to manage, is that there's always lots of work to be done, more work than we can realistically do. And in systems and software, we want to do the right work, and by right work we mean complete the tasks that are most valuable for you as an individual customer, whether that's Ocean or CEN or GPN or whoever, and also do the work that has benefits for our customers collectively. And there's a bunch of challenges here, centered around like how do we make it fair, fair to you as our customers individually and collectively, fair to us internally, and how do we make it easy to manage priorities? Software is only part of the challenge, but this is the part that I'm responsible for. So that's that's what I'm going to be talking about here. So historically, we've been able to provide some kind of visibility, various kinds of visibility into the tickets that people have active. So, Luke mentioned this already, and we've had emailed reports and things like that, which are, that's fine. It's one way to get visibility. And despite the big red sign on that, I think that there's still potential value in that kind of reporting. But it's by necessity, it's going to be periodic. It's not really interactive. It's challenging to, especially when there's a lot of information there, to sort of digest that. So some of the things that we've been looking at and that we're going to be continuing to look at is, how do we help not just figure out what work we need to prioritize, but like how do we make it easy to prioritize those things. So there's a couple of directions that we've been looking at here, and one of them is the GlobalNOC ticketing portal. So we'll shared a slightly different screenshot there, and one of the nice things about this is that it's live and it's on demand. So if you're getting like a regularly emailed ticket, a regularly emailed report, if that's weekly, if you want to see what the state is today, then you can just go to the ticket portal, select your organization, and see that information right there. And you can drill down through the tickets and like get more direct information. From our side, one of the important things here is that those priority numbers, and if you can see the screenshot on this side, we can report on those and see that in ServiceNow. And so one of the really useful things for us here is that this lets us see what the customer priorities are in the context of our entire customer base. So from a software point of view, one of the things that we're going to be really trying to focus on is continuing to find ways to make it easier for everyone to understand what's important. There are lots of factors that we take into consideration when we're trying to decide what's important. The goal here is to continue to develop the ticketing portal, potentially make that more interactive, make it so that people can maybe set the priorities directly. Right now, that's mediated by the CRM typically. And just sort of in general, like try and keep the process of prioritization as lightweight and as practical as possible. So another area that I wanted to talk about, because this is like a pretty big thing that's going on, is the GlobalNOC DB UI refresh. We introduced this in the last GlobalNOC Connect, and there's been lots of progress since then. So there's a lot of goals around this. one of the goals internally is we're using this to help us investigate and maybe set some new development paradigms. From your point of view, I mean, you don't care like how, and you shouldn't have to care what architectures we use or anything like that. But the things that you do care about are that it's easier and quicker for you to get new features, bug fixes, all of those kinds of things. So those are internal drivers, at least some of the internal drivers. This also connects with some other directions that we're exploring in new deployment models that I'll talk about a little bit later on. But from the other big thing here is, from your point of view, there's a bunch of reasons for this, for doing the new UI. So I feel a little bit hesitant sometimes to talk about aesthetics, but and maybe that's not quite the right word, but we want the UI to be flexible, and people have to spend a lot of time looking at it. Technologies have changed a lot over the past few years, and we need to support mobile devices. People are working on tablets and sometimes on phones. So there's a bunch of drivers beyond the internal ones that will make it better for everyone. So where are we today? We've got all of the key infrastructure components are complete. So you can get list and detail views for localities, POPs, racks, nodes, interfaces, circuits, contacts, and entities. I think that's a complete list. There's still some work to do, but if you want to today, so we've been basically going through the different sections of the DB in pretty much in order of frequency of use. I'm not going to put a percentage on it, but it should be possible today to do most of the routine work that people need to do in the DB in the new UI. We've got a couple of screenshots here showing, we've got contact detail page, entity details, the node list. And, one of the things that I want to get out here is if you're not using the new UI today, we want to encourage you to do so. Click on that settings link in the bottom left of the legacy UI and turn it on, try it out, kick the tires, give us feedback, and we're definitely interested to hear all of that. Excuse me. So what do we have left to do? There's still quite, still quite a few bits left. So IP addressing, BGP peerings, device types. There's some internal pages that most users outside of my group don't usually see. So the administrative section where we define data types, access control policy, those kinds of things. We are going to be chipping away at these, and we expect these actually to go a lot quicker. There's a lot of common components that we've been developing as we've been going along, and now basically those will just slot into place as we try and finish this up. So where are we going next? So we're aiming for more or less feature parity by the end of this summer. I think people may recall that we have student developers working on this. That's been working out really great. We're hoping that we can keep that momentum going, and if all goes well, we'll hit that target. After that, the general idea there is, we want to sort of not exactly pause, but sort of review and see where we are. There are some other areas where we've been learning lessons about potential new development standards and frameworks that we might use. The GlobalNOC Lite UI is an example. and just sort of see if we need to make any course adjustments in the plan there. Maybe we'll tweak things a little bit, nudge the directions that we're taking one way or another. And then from there, start planning out new functionality and features, improve usability, like tweak the appearance to try and make it a little more usable if we can. And then, hopefully we'll move from there towards mapping out a path to the deprecation of the legacy UI. Okay. Anybody got any questions about the DBUI before Okay. So I'm going to talk real quick about GlobalNOC Lite, and again, sort of how this fits into our development priorities. We are going to be talking about this more later today. Once again, hopefully I won't tread on people's toes. So from the systems and software side, GlobalNOC Lite includes some new approaches to some of the ways that we do things. That includes how the network management systems respond to monitoring events, like what happens when an alarm fires, how we populate the network model, some new development standards, and sort of and UI standards and like the look and feel of the application. And we're trying to feed all of those lessons into other development areas. Excuse me. And Luke and Ian are going to be talking more about this later today, so I won't go into like much more detail here. There's a screenshot. Thank you to Marion for allowing us to share this, just showing like the UI. People get a list of nodes, and the customer can set monitoring policies and other things there. In this context, the key points are that so in GlobalNOC Lite, you can optionally have network devices auto-discovered. And the second one, which is in many ways like a pretty radical shift, is that the GlobalNOC Lite service presents automatic customer notifications for most alerts. The driver for that is, basically like this is supposed to be a low effort service, something that is economically viable for small campuses and things like that. So that means having, machines are cheap, right? But that ties into some other like very high level priorities, specifically automation. We're going to be seeing more of that word as we go along here. Automation is the thread that is connecting a lot of the things in the talk that I'm giving and going across many of the talks that we're going to be giving through the rest of the day and tomorrow. Excuse me. So I'm going to move on now to the portals and dashboards. We've talked about this a lot already, and like this is a huge growth area, a lot of interest, which makes a lot of sense, right? It's a great way to, we pride ourselves like with our network management tools. There's this ecosystem of like tightly integrated like tools and services, but even despite that, there's still a whole bunch of different data sources, and the portals and the work that Dan's team have done provide a really good way to sort of pull information into one place where you can cross-reference alerts, the network model, all kinds of things. So in the future, like we're going to continue to grow our collections, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, the thing that Adam brought up. And James, and coming up with this portfolio and like how you might share them, have like a more general benefit. So looking at purpose-specific portals and dashboards, for some of those that might imply new data sources and the backing microservices, trying to make them smarter as well. So, and I'll come to an example of that in just a moment. And giving the portals, or at least the data sources that they talk to, knowledge about the network that lets people construct dashboards that are more useful and more meaningful. Excuse me. We've also mentioned already expanding auth and access control options, and that's something that we know is really important. Dan, I apologize if you're going to talk about this later on, but there's some work that we've been doing where we can potentially allow authentication via Google or Microsoft 365. So, that potentially opens the door for much wider constituencies to have access to portals, but in a controlled way. That's still very much in the experimental stages. But, we've heard like very clearly that in all kinds of contexts, people want to be sharing this information, and there need to be like good ways to control that access in a structured way, whilst making it relatively easy to share it like to much broader constituencies than is practical today. So I have an example of one of the portals, only slightly redacted. Thank you to Nwave for letting us share that. So, one of the nice things here that this is illustrating is combining multiple data sources. We're pulling in alert information, ticketing information, the network model, all of those things, all in this single pane of glass. One of the other things here, we talked about these like smart microservices, so like data services that have an awareness of the network model. So this illustrates that. So Denver, in this case, is multi-homed. So, one device being out, like you might have a quote unquote outage, but it's not service impacted. And, being able to reflect that in a meaningful way is something that we're going to be continuing to work on. So Luke showed the user notifications portal that we've recently built out for Nwave. So the direction that this is, the fact that we have this new way of doing notifications is really important. But this is important or interesting in other ways. So this is a case where we're using Grafana for read-write functionality, which is something that's relatively new, and we're looking towards, for certain contexts, using Grafana as a more general purpose UI toolkit. We've got all of these data backends that we've constructed. Grafana basically like comes with this enormous toolkit of ways to visualize and interpret that data. So, there are certain contexts where it makes a lot of sense for us to use that. Excuse me. And that sort of like segues neatly into new notification models, which is another area that we are very much interested in. So same screenshot here, and I'm not going to go into like a huge number of details, but like Luke already talked about this new notification model that's subscription-based, per user, per service, and per location. So right now, like this is something that we developed for Nwave, and it is somewhat tailored to their use cases. But this is something that we've heard quite a bit of interest in recently. You know, historically, notifications have been, you know, it's based on mailing lists or, you know, more general, like broadcast to large lists of people that we pull out of the DB. And one of the things that we've definitely learned over time is people have very different opinions about what kinds of outages or what kind of incidents they want to be notified about. So putting that in the hands of the user is a really important direction, letting them determine, you know, if they want to get alerts on everything, then they can do that. If there's just one tiny piece of infrastructure that they're interested in, we can scope that. So I think this is an area that we're going to be continuing to sort of expand on and generalize it, you know, so the idea of having per, you know, pick a data type, basically, per circuit, per interface, per node, per site, like we're doing for N-Wave, or per service, like if we have these sort of more abstract models. Service is a very broad term, and you know, one of the challenges is figuring out like how we abstract those in a generalizable way. All right. So I'm going to move on now to, I realize I'm sort of hopping around from topic to topic, to talk about our private cloud infrastructure. Again, you know, this is something that we've been working on for a while now. You know, we talked about it in the last Connects. So we have OpenStack-based private clouds for not all, but many of our customers. It's the primary hosting environment for many of our tools. You know, this has been a huge initiative over the past couple of years, investing in our infrastructure. You know, it's a completely different deployment model and a huge learning experience. You know, until we started building this out, our the way that we would deploy systems and services was, I don't want to say old school, but you know, we was typically focused on physical hardware. We had some targeted virtualization. Our cloud infrastructure has completely transformed that. It's got us lots and lots of wins. You know, we're more agile, more elastic. It's opened the door for all kinds of different models for resiliency and redundancy and failover. And we want to continue building on that model. As well as having a lot of the excuse me, having the main tools instances in our cloud infrastructure. We've also been coalescing some of the dedicated customer tools instances into that primary cloud, into the primary clouds in Bloomington and Indianapolis. You know, that's a win for everyone. That means reduced management overhead, which in turn means that you know, we can focus resources on other areas. Also makes a lot of economic sense. So where are we going with this? So, you know, the OpenStack is not just our primary hosting environment. This is now our primary and default deployment architecture. Basically, you know, unless there's some very specific reason to do so, like we don't want to be deploying physical servers. Instances of tools are going to be based around this model. You know, whether that's new turnups, hardware lifecycle replacements, anything like that. Something that we're going to be looking at as well is developing a hyper-converged option for specific contexts. So, you know, basically like a single box OpenStack instance. There are a number of cases, usually focused around partition networks, or there are some other contexts where we require on-premise management infrastructure. There's a couple of networks where this is necessary and or desirable. And instead of, sometimes there's multiple physical servers, and you know, the goal is that we'll be able to converge those onto a single box. The advantage for that is that this is, it's the same control and management interface for remote equipment as it is for the centralized infrastructure. So we can deploy new services using those same APIs, those same interfaces. It's all about like commonality of control, right? And one of the big things here that we're going to be, and I'll come back to this, is looking at new deployment models and how we deliver our software, really starting to leverage that cloud infrastructure. Okay. So another really important area is monitoring. There's something that we've just started work on that I think is going to be really, really, really important, is improved support for large numbers of concurrent alarms. Today, people look at AlertMon, or and you might see what's going on there, and all alarms are treated as if they're equally important. So whether it's a core node is down or an interface is down on some like obscure switch somewhere, they all pop up, and it's basically on a human to sort of interpret which of those 2 or 3 or 300 alerts needs to be prioritized. In reality, like not all alarms are just as important, and one of the things that we want to do here is make the NOC and engineering more effective by giving them a better handle on basically like what's important and what things they need to focus on in the face of a major outage. Basically like failures at key points on the network can create huge numbers of alerts. If sort of the canonical example is, if you've got a core node goes down for like whatever reason, you might have enormous numbers of alerts from downstream devices. If your management connectivity is compromised, then you potentially have thousands of alerts. So this creates like serious challenges around triage and investigation. And this is something that we really want to work on. So the current direction, and this was put together by Ben, and his team are going to be working on this, is basically to be able to set limits on a per pop, so a physical location, or a per alarm type basis. So basically you'll be able to specify a policy that says, this kind of alarm is very important, and these kinds of alarms are less important. And when there's a lot of alarms for a somewhat arbitrary definition of a lot, then it's these important ones that need to be shown, and maybe put the other ones to the side in the interests of figuring out what's going on. So the canonical example of that I pretty much already described is you'd want to prioritize alerts that are on maybe your core networking infrastructure, and de-emphasize downstream alerts. If you've got a core node that's down, you need to know that. You don't need to see all of the like not reachable alarms for the downstream edge devices. You definitely don't need to see interface alerts, dozens of them on every given network device saying unknown status. Like that's no use. So we're going to be working on this like in the next few weeks, and that's something that I'm really excited about. So monitoring in general, we've got, last time we talked about the classification and ingest pipeline is mature now. We're still like adding like little bits of functionality to that, but like that's very much burned in. We feel very comfortable with it. Something that we want to get back to is adding alternate sources of monitoring events, so making it easier to ingest from syslog, for instance, streaming telemetry, perhaps, other sources of information. But a really important area that we're going to be starting to look at is building out support for automated actions. So again, we're coming back to, this idea of this thread of automation. And you may recall, we mentioned earlier in the context of talking about GlobalNOC Lite, there we've got an initial relatively straightforward use case where, there's a particular class of alarms and we send an email. So, we're going to be taking what we learned from that and applying it to the more general case. And I'll be coming back to this in just a second, but, the longer term goal here is working towards remediation, automated remediation based on alert data and potentially other sources of information. Like that's really the key here. That's the grand prize. So, we have a long history of automation. I hope you will saw the segue there. In the context of networks, from Sherpa in the NLR days, Internet 2's Cloud Connect, that was OpenFlow based. It's now MPLS, it's used to provision layer 3 VPNs to cloud providers. Internally, we developed this tool that was, one way to look at that. It's sort of like a device agnostic PSSH with DB integration. So it enabled people to run commands on a whole bunch of different devices. Obviously, we didn't write AWX and Ansible, but they're at the center of a lot of our network automation efforts. And AJ is going to be talking more about how we leverage AWX, the GlobalNOC automation tool, and GSCS. But, we've got all of this experience in, building out network automation, and what we're trying to do here is sort of extend that stance more generally to all of our systems and, make this pervasive, not just across networks and not just for network engineers and not just across the systems and software tools. Fine, I can click a button in a UI and I'll get a new virtual instance in our cloud. Great. But we want to make this, take this stance and sort of pull together like all of those automation threads across all of our systems and services. I'm going to add the little qualifier here of where it makes sense. One of the really important things that we are very much trying to keep sight of is having machines do the things that machines are good at and having people do the things that people are good at. The other day we were in a meeting and Marianne mentioned how, if you call the service desk, you're not going to get a phone tree, you're not going to get a voicemail, you're going to get a person. And, the kind of automation where you're looking for help and you get, press 1, press 2, those are the kinds of things that we want to avoid, because having a person who has some context and has some understanding of you as a customer, those are the things that we want to free up cycles for, whilst having the machines do the things that they're good at. So how are we going to get there, right? This is a huge thing. So there's a couple of ways that we're approaching this. So you may recall last time when we were talking about organizational design, we mentioned our automation engineer position in the systems and software group, John Ratliff. I don't know if he's here right now, but John's been like super busy in his new position, and there are lots of wins there that we've had already that they're not going to be like super visible to you as the customers, not directly, but they really do make a difference. So, some examples are account turnups and turndowns, creating new virtual instances in our cloud infrastructure, base system QA reporting, security remediations. Like these are all human intensive, labor intensive, time consuming tasks that, have been cut down to, in some cases from hours to literal minutes. Base QA is a great example of a process. QA is really important. We had checklists that would take like, half a day. Now you get the same set of results with a report that's generated, and you spend 20 minutes just going through that and making sure, seeing if there's any issues. Huge time savings that, again, lets us focus on other areas. So, basically, like, we get to do these kinds of tasks quicker, with better quality, better consistency, and then we get to take those cycles and put them towards the things that you do care about. So where are we going? So we want to continue to build on our progress with our orchestration platform and in other areas, helping facilitate service deployments and upgrades, looking at new deployment models. Again, this is all about reducing overhead, basically, and simplifying things. So containerization, all those kinds of things. And trying to look at this from like the 30,000-foot view, like where we really want to go with this is pulling together like all of these automation components. So the things that we can do on the systems engineering side, the things that we can do on the network engineering side, and really having this like integrated automation approach. And a great example of that we're currently looking at is BGP auto remediation. This is currently in development, and we're doing some testing. And the general idea of for those first steps is to be able to go from a specific alarm. So we've got these alerting systems, and it detects a problem with BGP, and kick off an automated action. Initially, the idea is that that's a set of information gathering steps. Again, this is making us more effective. This reduces engineer time spent investigating. Like there are a set of commands that they don't have to type because it's already generated and it's all been shoved into a ticket for them. Where we want to go from that is, there's this general idea of automated actions based on alert conditions. Now we've got this classification pipeline. And step one is information gathering. Where we want to go in the future is that'll lead us towards recommending remediation steps. So, building out some logic that's like, hey, if you're a network engineer, these are the diagnostics that we've run. You might want to try this, this, this. And then finally, the idea is that that'll move us towards automating, actually resolving common or even not so common failure modes. Okay, so
David, you're just over time here. I don't know how much you got left, but you can keep it.
I'm pretty much done.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Just got 2 more slides. So I just got a couple more things real quick that sort of like don't really fit in anywhere else, but I did want to mention them. So IPv6 management, this is something that we're going to be looking at definitely in the next few months. So we deployed multiple management address support in the DB in the last year. That's useful in lots of ways. Different network paths have different contexts, basically. So you might want to have telemetry from a given device on one path, management on another. One case of multiple managed addresses is IPv6. IPv6 is coming, maybe for real, finally. Everybody's been saying that for at least the past 20 years. But it seems like it's really coming true right now, if nothing else, for N-Wave, for the federal government. There's actual like executive orders that they have to comply with. So where we're going there is we're going to be building out pervasive support for the rest of our network tools for both for multiple management addresses and IPv6. We don't have a timeline for that yet, but I think it's 20% of federal network devices by the end of fiscal year 2023. So, that's hopefully we can hit that goal well ahead of time, but that's certainly providing a framework for the timeline. And the last thing that I wanted to mention, availability reporting. So this has been a hot topic recently. A lot of people have been asking about it. The main thing here is we wanted to know that that we absolutely hear everyone on this. I know that Grover has been talking to the regionals people, and trying to get a handle on. So availability reporting is one of those things. It's like a portal. What does it mean? And what do we base the reporting on? BGP peering status, ticket information. Those are ways that we can do it today. But interface status, device status. How do you handle compound and redundant services? What about maintenances? Are they included? What about soft failures? So is it if it's performance that isn't meeting SLAs, but the connection isn't actually down, what does that mean? How do you account for all of that? And so lots of questions here. This is something that we want to continue having a conversation about. We're not sure what the right direction is or what the right directions are. But we just want to get that out there as something that we recognize is important to people, and maybe we can have a conversation about that right now if you want. Except I've probably burned all of the time left for questions, but we'll make extra time. So that was it. I hope that was useful. Does anybody have any questions?